I believe we are live. Yes, we are. All right. Hey, everyone. I hope you're here. We are starting on time, so we'll give some folks a chance to log in and come on in here. But welcome to DevOps Unbound. And this is a special edition of DevOps Unbound. We do them about once every 4 to 6 weeks, and we call it our live roundtable edition of DevOps Unbound. And my name is Alan Schimmel. I'm the CEO, editor in chief at Techstrong Group, the folks behind DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, Container Journal, uh, Digital CXO, Techstrong TV, as well as many video series, much like this, DevOps Unbound. Before we go any further, I want to shout out our sponsor for DevOps Unbound is the good folks at Tricentis. And Tricentis is has been partnering with us on DevOps Unbound now for I think 2 years, maybe 2+ years, and they are a terrific partner. Also, obviously, the worldwide leader in continuous testing. You should check them out. But many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring. For those of you who are here for the first time, DevOps Unbound really at every show, and it's usually every 2 weeks, and then as I said, once a month to 6 weeks, we do these live events. We look at interesting topics in frontiers in DevOps, right? And there's very little DevOps related that we won't put under our focus. But today's show is kind of right in the meat of things, and especially with what's going on in the world today. I'm going to introduce you to our panel in just a minute, but a word about these live roundtables. The reason we do them is because of you, our audience, right? We could go on Zoom and record these and show them to you, and it's all fine. We've got 7 people, including me, on this show, and we have no problem talking for an hour about observability and testing, which is what we're going to cover today. But what really makes these shows special are you, the studio audience. In these shows, when they run right, you guys drive the discussion, and you drive the discussion by using the chat function and Q&A function in your browser windows. For most of you using a browser, it'll be on the right side of the browser. You'll see that communication panel. And if you see chat by default is lit up, and usually public is lit up, you can talk to anyone right in there, right? Just feel free to chat away. I think many of you already are. It's always good to see where everyone is from, because the magic of the internet, right? It's a worldwide audience. So feel free to let us know where you're logging on from there. Make sure the chat works. So that public chat is great if you want to talk to other attendees as well as some of our panel members. The Q&A tab next to chat up on top there is great if you have a specific question or comment for the panel that you'd like us to address. Put it in there. I check it all the time, as does the rest of the panel, and we'll present it to the panel, and let's see what we have to hear, say about it. So use chat, use Q&A, and if someone else post a comment or something in chat and you want to answer, feel free to chat away and answer that as well. We do. And that's when these things work best, when the audience is involved. So please feel free to get involved, be involved. I'm coming at you today from South Florida, Boca Raton. It's good to see you all from around the globe. Let me introduce you now, though, to our fantastic panel that we have for today. I'm going to tell you their name and ask them to give you their own background. So this way, I don't have to read their bios and you can really hear what they're about. Let me first introduce you to Brian Cole. Brian is a director of customer engineering at Tricentis. Hey, Brian, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Brian Cole. I am responsible for evangelism and advocacy for the NeoLoad product line in particular, but performance testing and performance engineering generally. And today's subject is near and dear to my heart. I also chair the Performance Advisory Council, and the theme of this year's event is observability and testing. You can't do one without the other and expect to have a good outcome. And I'm super happy to be here.
Fantastic. Next up, I want to introduce you to Adriana Villela. Adriana is with a senior developer advocate at Lightstep. Excuse me. Hi, Adriana. How are you? Want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, nice to be here. I'm Adriana Villela. I am based out of Toronto, Canada, senior developer advocate at Lightstep. I'm fresh into this role, just started in April. I was previously managing an observability team at 2Cows, so got really familiar with observability. And I'd say after my first love being DevOps, I think observability is now my second love. Super passionate about it, super passionate about the topic today, so I'm really excited for the discussion.
You know, every time you say 2Cows, I'm taken back to my early days of playing on the internet and what a powerhouse. I mean, I spent a lot of time on 2Cows in those days.
I know, right?
Next up, well, first of all, thanks, Adriana. We appreciate you having you here. Next up, I want to introduce you to Bjorn Edwin. Bjorn's a principal consultant with Latario. And Bjorn, why don't you give a little background on yourself?
Thank you, Alan. Hello, everybody. Bjorn Edwin here. I'm one of principal consultants for the app. I also...
I don't know. Are you guys hearing Bjorn? I'm not.
We are. We
okay.
are.
Yep.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Very weird.
Right, take two. Bjorn Edwin here, from principal consultant from the Atrio. I also head our Dojo enablement.
I can't hear. I think we're having a little difficulty here. I can't hear Bjorn.
I can hear Bjorn.
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear him too.
You're not reaching South Florida, Bjorn. Sorry, you can't get from Jacksonville to
Really?
to the UK. You can get from Ghana.
I thought I'll be successful because I'm closer to Alan.
I think Alan's reconnecting. Why don't you go ahead, Bjorn, and take three.
Take number three. Hello, everybody. You should probably know my name by now. So I'm principal consultant at Liatrio. I also lead our Dojo or enablement practice. And one of my passionate thing is basically helping teams and organization to do DevOps right? It's not just about bringing all the people together or using the right tools or buy a tool in the market that says DevOps and you go DevOps, but what's the right way of doing it and pushing them to the right culture behind it, the behaviors behind it. So I wanted to push a lot of people towards the right triangle of people, process, and tools. And I would say that's my passionate thing. My background is mostly from application delivery, testing, doing more from the legacy waterfall side and pushing them into more modern practices, more DevOps ways of working and whatnot. So this is going to be a very passionate topic for me to see. That's where I'm actively pushing our teams and customers to go towards continuous testing, observability, to reach that last flagpole of DevOps, right? So it's very easy to start the first one, and we want to go all the way to the end. So looking forward for a great discussion today.
Fantastic. Bjorn, I can hear you. No, I apologize.
Awesome.
So back to my old customer support script and just restarted things. Always works. Anyway, last but not least, I want to introduce you to I always think she's a rock star. She'll tell you she's not, but she is. Her name is Charity Majors, CTO, co-founder. Charity, why don't you, I didn't mean to embarrass you, but go ahead, give us your background.
Quite all right. No, I'm not a rock star. I was a classical pianist, so family.
Close.
Liszt was the rock star of the 1700s. So anyway, so co-founder, CTO of Honeycomb.io, ops engineer, previously of Parse, Facebook, Linden Lab, etc. Oh, and co-author of the brand new Observability Engineering book. It just came out in hard copy last month. So if you haven't gotten it yet, you can get it. You can also get a free copy if you're following the Honeycomb.io Twitter account. We post the link fairly frequently. So
very cool. Hold that book up again, Charity. Let's see it. There it is. Very cool. Congratulations.
I like the bling on it.
Yeah.
With the bling,
you blinged yours.
You can get a sheet of stickers. If you have the hard copy, I'll mail it to you. If you leave us a review on Amazon, I'll mail you the stickers and you can decorate your own.
Very cool. Very cool. Hey, all right. So that's last but not least, my co-host on here is Mitchell Ashley. And Mitch, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I was pretty bedazzled by all the stickers too, so I don't blame you. Congratulations, Charity. I know you've worked really hard with the other authors on your book, so fantastic. It's a great book, by the way. I've read it. It is awesome.
3 years. We were like, oh, this will take us 6 months to write. 3.5 years later, we're like,
I consider it a must read. So go check it out. Go grab the books. But you can get it with free ones. So anyway, Mitch Ashley, CTO with Techstrong Group, and also working with our research organization. So, and going back to the early 2000s, podcast co-host with Alan of many conversations. So good to be here, Alan. Again, what a wonderful crew we have here on the panel.
Absolutely. Thanks. And thanks for coming along with me, Mitch. We make it work here. Just, hey, before we start again, you can chat to everyone in the chat window. If you use the Q&A window, no one's put anything in there yet, I believe. But those are for questions right here to our panel, and feel free to jump in. So as we've alluded to, today's episode is living at the intersection between testing and observability. And I guess before we kind of talk about living at the intersection between testing and observability, we should define what we mean by testing and what we mean by observability. I think testing is a term that's been around for many of us for most of our careers and before. It's fairly easily understood, right? But, you know, there are obviously many different facets to testing. There's pre-deployment testing, there's post-deployment testing as well, and many different flavors of that testing. Observability, on the other hand, is a more recent term that's burst on our scene, hence Charity's book. And it's probably a little bit less clear, maybe to everyone in our audience. So, Charity, now that you wrote the book, it's kind of, you know, there's no getting around it. You're the expert. Why don't you define observability here in terms of our discussion today?
Observability is the ability to look at your system and understand the unknown unknowns, not just the known unknowns, the things you could just questions you knew that you needed to ask up front. It's the ability to understand what's happening inside the system just by looking at it from the outside of the system without having to ship new custom code to understand what's going on, because that implies that it was a known unknown that you knew in advance, right? The idea is that you don't know in advance what you're going to need to understand, and therefore you need to be able to ask any questions, interrogate your systems, figure out what's going on the inside just from the outside. There's a lot of things that proceed from that, by the way. If you accept that definition, it means that you have to have a solution that handles high cardinality, high dimensionality, like explorability, all these things that like the previous generation of software that like monitoring or anything that's based on the metric just actually doesn't have. So I think a lot of the confusion out there is because, you know, we defined this new technical standard that has an actual definition. Then everybody's like, oh, well, we do it too because we do telemetry, we do monitoring, we do like instrumentation. Anybody who does anything about visibility now says they do observability. And I'm bothered by that.
Well, it muddles the water. I think we're all probably a little bothered by that, right? And this is always, I mean, this is not an uncommon problem in tech. Something gets popular and all of a sudden everybody wants to be in there. I've seen it a few times in companies Mitchell and I started, but never, you know, and I guess, you know, when you go through the Gartner hype cycles, right, it's that, you know, when it falls into the trough of disillusionment, then they all run away from it, right? But right here at the peak hype, you know, everybody's involved.
Exactly.
Yep. Adriana, I know, you know, in talking before we went live today, you spoke about, you know, and even in your introduction to the audience, how observability has really, you know, become a major focus of your career right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I stumbled into observability through Charity's tweets a couple of years ago, and it took me a while to like fully grasp what observability was. until I was thrust into the position of leading an observability team at 2 Cows. And then I made it my mission of like making sure that like we needed to do right by the company by doing proper observability and not just schlepping a bunch of tools together. It's kind of like the DevOps thing, right? You use a tool, therefore you are DevOps. You use observability tool, therefore you have observability. And I wanted to like, I wanted to cut that like right away, nip it in the bud before it became an issue. So my mission was like really making sure that the company had a good understanding of what observability was. And once we had the fundamentals, then we could focus on like practicing observability.
Yep. You know, and we have a question from a participant who wanted to know, do we have any metrics to quantify the observability? I don't know if I call it the observability, it's observability. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about metrics, right? That's how, you know, we use to, well.
There are 2 ways to use the word metrics. There's little m metrics, which is just like numbers about how things were going. And then there's capital M metrics, which is, you know, the building block that the last generation of technology was built upon, which is a number with some tags appended to it. And then you have time series databases, you know, that you know, aggregate them over an interval and so forth. And my argument is that no tool that's based on the metric will ever qualify as observability, because you have to predefine your custom metrics up front, which means you have to figure out in advance what questions you want to ask of these complex systems, which means that you are not capable of asking new questions and understanding different, you know, emergent qualities or outages or anything. So like part of what I would argue is the foundation of observability is moving from metrics-based tools to capital M metrics-based tools to tools that are based on the building block of these arbitrarily wide structured data blobs, where every dimension, it can be a high cardinality dimension.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Hey, let's move, you know, I think we've, you know, done our best to kind of lay out there what observability is for purposes of today. Brian, I see you gave a nice answer in the chat as well, but I wanted to really kind of define the nexus, the intersection, the connection between observability and testing. And hey, you're with Tricentis, so I'm going to ask you.
So when we talk about observability, we're in particular through a testing lens. I'm representing Tricentis. We are focused on managing the quality process through your DevOps tool chains and ensuring you have a good understanding of what's happening. Observability is a core component of that. These systems have gotten so complex that it's impossible for any one human to understand the entirety of the system anymore. It's a thing of the past. And to Charity's point, if you look at a performance testing solution like Neoload and you say, great, it has built-in monitors, I don't need anything else, those are so limited compared to what true observability actually means. You have to know ahead of time exactly what you need to monitor to understand what the system's going to be doing. And systems, unfortunately, are extraordinarily complex, behave very strangely under load conditions as they're being developed, and have all these interrelated components on third-party systems, cloud providers, cloud services that can have a negative impact on how your application performs and scales, that without this understanding and the ability to ask questions and really figure out what the heck just happened as I'm running this test, you're going to be in the cycle of constantly rerunning tests and fiddling with your monitors, desperately trying to understand what happened. A true observability mindset is what's required to effectively manage the quality process.
Excellent. I want to push back a little bit though on the I hate metrics, but the anti-metrics thing, or it's more than metrics. Bjorn, you put a comment in the chat, you know, kind of +1ing on Charity. We should avoid metrics-driven delivery at all stages of the software development lifecycle. You know what? So I come from a background where we were taught in technology, we everything could be measured and we measure everything. And based upon what we measure is how we manage and do. It kind of bumps heads with the let's stay away from the metrics-driven delivery.
Yeah, so I think the subtle change is measuring. I'm all in for measuring. I think we wanted to know where we're going. We want to know how we are going. So that's measuring. This is like driving a car and you have all the panels to how we're going about it. So that's measuring to me. What we wanted to avoid is put a limit at the end of it saying, this is what I wanted to go after and this is what I want to accomplish without a big reasoning behind why. So the metrics are, in my point of view, are leading indicators to an outcome, a business outcome or value that we want to accomplish out of this. Even putting a system like observability, as more teams are going into the DevOps ways of working, there is a specific reason why this is pretty important, because you are incurring technical debt, you're incurring systemic debt as we go along, and we need to have this intelligent system in place to make sure it is telling you where the failure is and why this failure is happening to us. That's the right measurement. Rather, I would avoid things like I wanted to get like the common thing that I always get is, can we get something like 100% reliability or 100% code coverage or things like that. So I think those are something that we should avoid to hit at, and being the only driving factor to go towards a specific outcome.
One thing that I'd like to add to that, in terms of, because I agree with Bjorn's comment, it's really measuring, not so much metrics, and how do we measure successful observability? And the way I look at it is, do you have enough information? Like, is your code sufficiently instrumented such that if you were to fire up your observability system and shit hits the fan, do you have enough information to tell what's going on? And I'd say that is successful observability. And I think tying it back to testing, then I think testers can help tease that out in the testing process. Hey, is the code sufficiently instrumented based on what we see right now? So they can help identify maybe some instrumentation that might be missing during the testing process.
Identifying those gaps. I completely agree with all of this. And it's just as prevalent in the QA space as well. I've had conversations with customers who are showing off their metrics-based quality dashboard, and I look at all the metrics they're using and I say, the easiest way to turn all of these things green is to stop running tests. Just don't test anything and all your metrics go green. That's what we're talking about here. The quality metrics we're collecting from those systems under test, yes, we still need them, but they're not important in and of themselves. It's the understanding of why they're representing what they're doing at any moment in time that really matters, and being able to trace that back to how your code is behaving, what's going on those systems, why is it doing the thing it's doing right now.
I think often, like, observability and understanding systems gets kind of, and I understand why we get drawn back to like outages and things failing and everything, because that's the flashy, but like, we should be proactively understanding our software every day. Instead of, in the old days, it was like you'd set up these monitoring alerts and then you'd wait for the pager to go off, and you would never like look at your code. You wouldn't look at your instrumentation so much as you'd wait for it to tell you something's terribly wrong. But that threshold for paging people should be pretty high. Like, a lot of things have to go wrong before a human gets woken up in the middle of the night, which is why as you're writing code, kind of shifting it left and focusing more on, you almost want to think of your observability system as like a production REPL, right? You want to be able to write your code, look at it through the lens of your instrumentation in production, and just have that be a very tight feedback loop as you're changing things, as you're rolling things out. And as Brian was saying about testing, I think of testing as being like the very first step towards gaining confidence in your code. Like, it's it's like basically saying, does the logic work? Right? Have we regressed at all? But like, your code is not, like, code alone is nothing. it's nothing. It's useless unless users are using it in production on a, the infrastructure, the state of things, the current, users that are using it. Like, all of these things are part of the system along with the code, and testing offline can't encompass that, which is why you see my shirt says test and prod or live a lie. And people get really like upset about saying I test and prod, but everybody tests and prod. The only difference is some of us admit it and invest in it, instead of going, no, we don't test in production, which just means you're not actually looking at production.
Yeah. Well, let me. I'm going to posit to you, Charity. Is testing in production really observability?
Absolutely. Having good observability just means you're closing that loop, right? You're making sure that the code that you wrote is doing what you expected it to, and that nothing else looks weird, right? That's all it is. And the thing is that until recently, people haven't actually, if you don't have actual observability, if you only have monitoring tools based on the, capital M metric, I understand why people don't look at it much, because all you get is these very blunt answers, right? Did the errors go up or down? Does that correlate to users doing something different or my code doing something different? You don't have any way of knowing unless you have, high cardinality, high dimensionality, like raw row based systems that will let you deploy your code and see, oh, this change that I made is failing in these specific ways that are specifically different from the last version that I rolled out.
Absolutely. One of our participants put in here, some people test in production by accident and prod by accident. Bjorn, you deal with many different customers, so you're probably in a good position to answer that one.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things here. One, I 100% agree. The fear against testing in prod, like it's always in prod. To Charity's point, there's no value. The engineers and developers don't get paycheck if that product doesn't go to market, right? So it's like put it in a very simpler term. Our goal is to put that in front of the customer, and whatever we can do to make that as the best experience as possible is where we want to go at it. Testing, observability, these are all the tools that you have in place to make sure that road to the customer is as smooth as possible, as predictable as possible, and you're driving towards it. So in terms of testing and the whole mindset, my honest opinion is that testers needs to get into the role of this. I have to get into the continuous testing phase first. I think that's the first step. Before we jump onto that next shiny object of observability, I can go past this one and rely on my observability tool to give me all this feedback, so I can be lighter or drive more risk-based testing. No, I think these two complements each other. This is basically how are you getting insights of where the system can fail and what the failure is at different stages of the SDLC. Observability is closer to where the production, where the customers are facing. Testing is throughout. It starts from quality of your requirement to quality of your code practice and quality of your testing of or quality of your infrastructure or platform behind it and all those things. Everything should come together to ultimately tell that. So if you are testing it sooner in the cycle, testing its production should not be a big deal. If that is not happening, then testing in production is a nightmare. So how do we make sure we step up to that level, right? So that's what I would say most of the customers are fearing, because this is the goal to go after. But let's break down the goal, saying let's make sure you as a developer, you have the best test written to catch that logic in the method that you've written. Let's start from that and build slowly on top of everything, so that testing leads into better practices, and observability gives you the most confidence to put that in production, basically.
There's also a tie-in from an observability metrics perspective back to testing to help inform what you should be testing. There's so many different aspects of executing a test case that drive the system. If you're getting observability metrics layered in that aren't being triggered by your test cases, you clearly have a testing gap. There is a deficiency in your test plans that you need to address. And it plays to a larger perception problem, I guess I would say, that exists in the industry, that quality assurance is somehow the responsibility of the QA team. And it is not. They do quality control, which is the verification that things are implemented as asked for. Everybody does QA, including the operations teams, including the business analysts, including the application owners. It happens throughout, and it should be continuous, and it should all be scraped together and codified into a view that lets you actually understand what's happening. And observability is the verification half of that. Yes, my test ran. Why did it run successfully? Was this test valid? Anybody who boasts about, I have 9,000 test cases, I'm a little wary of these types of metrics, because I might find 7,000 identical test cases that you're running over and over and over again without actually testing anything new in your system. And these are the general trends that we start to see. I've also begun to socialize the message that shift left is potentially starting to get a little fraught with the development community. They keep hearing it, everything should shift left.
But that's not what they really hear. What they really hear, this is my job.
Dude,
right?
you
It's
do it
become
now.
my
Yes,
job.
you do
Yeah,
everything.
it's my
You're
job.
responsible for performance,
Security, right here.
functionality, building it. It's
Yep.
everybody has a role to play in this. Absolutely. And the work the developers are already doing should be called quality because they're doing a lot of that already today and treated as such, as a first-class citizen in these types of quality discussions.
Yeah, when people talk about shifting left, the thing that I always think about is the research that Facebook and others have done that show that the longer it is from the time that you write the code, the cost of finding and fixing the bug goes up exponentially, right? So like you type the bug, you backspace, great, that was super fast, right? If you can fix it with tests, that's super fast. Once it's in production, if you're watching it, if you're like poking around and making sure that's still pretty fast. But if you let it go past that point, once you've swapped it, at the moment that you've written that code, you know exactly what you're trying to build, why, what you tried that didn't work, what the function names are, how it all works. And as soon as you switch your focus to some other part of the code, it all starts to drain away out of your head, right? You swap something else in, you swap that out, and the cost of finding and fixing that bug just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. If it's 6 months later, it might take someone 3 weeks to reproduce it and find it. So like finding it as early as possible, like that's what I think of when we talk about shift left, because it just makes it so much cheaper.
Absolutely. I want to talk about another aspect of the connection and intersection here. And that is, look, fundamentally, part of DevOps is feedback loops, right? And when we talk about observability, it's kind of the ultimate feedback, right? And so have we adequately made these loops and maintained these loops so that the findings, right, the intelligence that we're getting from observability makes its way into the next round of testing, right? Improving that code, right? Making a better product, satisfying customers.
There's
so
so much
things
that goes into that. Yes.
Yeah.
The idea here is when we talk about DevOps, there is the buzzword bingo. You slap the word continuous in front of it, and now it's part of a DevOps toolchain. So continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, continuous testing, whatever. An assessment part of that, continuous assessment, continually getting information and feedback from what's happening in operations, what's happening during your release and delivery timelines, and feeding that back into your Agile backlog and really focusing on continuously improving everything. God, I use the word continuously again. The messaging here is that I see in a lot of spaces on the internet is when we have a DevOps discussion, it's dev, and ops way over here. And that's really not the case. There's so much value, there's so much knowledge and information contained in the operational excellence of running these applications that can inform and structure your development organization. They can be leaders from a DevOps toolchain perspective by providing things like composable infrastructure. Nothing's more infuriating to an operations team than managing a cluster of databases and getting a new application that runs on the next version that you don't plan to upgrade to. These types of very basic interactions between all these teams can really lead to a lot of friction, and they're really easy to get around if you start communicating, and I don't see that enough.
Absolutely. Bjorn, you, again, in your role, consulting, I mean, how do you instill this? How do you, graft it into the organizations you're working with?
No, I have a magic wand. I wave at it.
That's what I figured, yeah. If I could borrow that wand, that would be cool.
Yeah. No, so let's break it down, right? So just intersecting two things: feedback. It's the process of feedback loop and the process of shifting left. So shifting left, it's making sure to Charity's point, to making sure we discover this sooner rather than later. So to do this sooner rather than later, we have to do these actions sooner rather than later to get that feedback. So when that starts. If the organization is siloed, like this is handing off a work to another person to do something else, dev, and ops, like all this after the 7 steps, if the 8th step is the operation step, that means there is application knowledge, there's domain knowledge is fading away at the end of it, and the operation just gets the system knowledge of it. how do we make sure that is across the board? The knowledge of the system is key. The knowledge of the application is the key, and also the knowledge of the domain. What the customer is expecting from the system to do it. That's the biggest challenge, to bring everything together in a place. That's the core of Shift Left, to making sure that knowledge is kind of in the center of the software delivery, where you could utilize the domain information, you could utilize the system information, and make sure you are able to build and test and deliver a very observable application at the end of it, so that it delivers value for the customer. So I would say that's from the customers, the challenges from the cultural mindset. We have a ton of experience from way we deliver software for so many years. I think we're really good at it. And I think that is also a hindrance to make sure we have to unlearn some things to learn new things to implement it in the current world. That is the second challenge in how people and teams kind of approach it. Like, how can I make sure there's a need to unlearn something here and introduce the learning aspect of things? So they need to slow down, to speed up, ultimately to speed up and improve on things. Just tying it back to like enterprise red tapes around, I cannot have a day dedicated to this one because I need to hit a deadline. I need to accomplish that. Just break it up. So how can we make sure we bring the leadership along to make sure they see the value out of that? And how can we give the confidence for the teams to say, you can experiment, this is how we should be approaching it and whatnot. And my last point on that is tying it back to the feedback loop side. I would say feedback loop starts in every process. The culture, the thing that I work very closely is, the shorter the feedback loop is better it is. If I don't understand a requirement that the business is giving me, my feedback loop starts right there. I need to ask all those clarifying questions to build, so that I'm not building a system on top of assumptions. Now let's take it to the next level. When I develop and write my unit test, I don't make any assumption, I need to test it. Slowly you extend to the last leg of it, which is where you're putting into a system. The system is having observability characteristics to provide you that system level feedback. And if the user can provide a feedback, which is ultimately what the DevOps loop is going to be like, so you're getting feedback from all the aspects of application, people, and the system to get into continuous improvement. And Brian, I said the continuous word one more time.
Absolutely. But it's more than that too. It's context. I can't just give server logs from how something's operating in a production context to the development organization. They don't have the right context to consume that information and get value from it. The translation of the information through the systems you're using to present it in a way that is meaningful and impactful for the stakeholders who are viewing it, ideally in the system of choice that they already use today. I don't want to force a dev team to start logging into an APM solution to begin to see what's going on in their observability space. I want that information published directly into their CI system or whatever else behind the scenes.
You know, to your point, Brian, the context in the environment that something happened in, because that's also changing, right? We think about continuous delivery of smaller and smaller bytes of code. We're using SaaS services and cloud services, and those things are changing, right? Our infrastructure is code, software that we're running on. All those are variables and more, a lot more, in addition to our own code, our own systems. Those things are changing, and whether it's hours or days or weeks from when something happened or minutes, you know, just giving someone a log, those conditions may be entirely gone. You know, for example, if it's a serverless, you know, kind of.
It's the worst case scenario for developers saying we have this intermittent issue in production. Fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
We have no data for you, no guidance to offer, but it happens every so often, and they have zero ability to replicate it in any of the QA systems.
Well, the idea that we have an environment that is static here and we can draw the line to
exactly,
here, it's just not there anymore. So you've got to be able to collect the data, have the context, and draw the threads.
To Charity's point earlier, without understanding what questions you need to ask ahead of time.
That's the challenge.
That's observability. It's very, very key to having a good quality effort.
You know, we have a comment in the Q&A area. Participant asked, or really more of a statement. So we need to have an observability strategy. Is it by project, program, at the org level?
Wherever
Charity,
you can get it.
Yeah, I'll take my observability where I can get it. We're going to quote you on that, Brian. But Charity, you wrote the book again. Tell us, you know, how do you set up an observability strategy?
That's a great question. And in fact, I just finished writing an ask. We have a column called Ask Miss Ollie, where people write in and ask their questions. And I just finished writing one to answer the question of what does an observability team do, right? Because I think a lot of it starts with the build versus buy question, because a lot of teams are used to running their own. But frankly, I think in this day and age, especially with cloud native stuff, every company, like engineering cycles are the scarcest resource that you have. And the more you can spend your engineering resources on your core differentiators, the thing that make you as a business, the better, right? The more you can outsource, all the other stuff, the stuff that you have to do in order to get to the stuff that you want to do, the better. So also, typically when you're running your own observability stuff, you're running it on the same infrastructures, you're running all the other stuff. So when something goes down, now you typically have two problems. You don't have the stuff to observe the stuff that you will need to bring up. Obviously I'm biased, I'm a vendor, but I think that usually your strategy starts with, figuring out who you want to use. And this is where I think that an observability team is really well placed to do what I think of as vendor engineering, which is, I think, one of the most challenging and underrated skills in engineering, which is just, they sit there between the organization engineering team and all the vendors out there, and they decide what to use, right? What will meet their team's needs. They invest in that. They handle upgrades and clients, and they provide a supported set of tools to the engineering org so that it's easy to do the right things and hard to do the wrong things, right? Maybe they write libraries or integrations that mean that, if you can just use a template to add a new service and a bunch of stuff happens magically, right? Maybe they need to write their own, integration or implementation of something because it makes it that much easier for their. But at the end of the day, it's about, it's also about having an observability culture of, blamelessness and blameless postmortems, and making it okay to ask questions, okay to fail, and, let's figure out how to, fix it together. But I think that convincing engineers to instrument their code using OTel, setting good patterns, right? You don't want to work at a company that has 10 different teams and 10 different ways of logging, right? Or 10 different libraries, providing some consistency and some guidance, because everybody in your organization shouldn't have to be an expert in observability, right? They should know enough to do a good job, but it's the job of your observability team. Also, as Mitch just said, it's also your observability teams to be those deep experts, and to make it clear to leadership why it's so vital to everything that they want to get done in the world, right? I think that there's a real role for I think they play the role of developer advocate and champion within their company as much as anything. But it's really just about being those domain experts, doing a lot of education, doing a lot of guidance, and writing the code and configuration to make sure that that you're doing a good job, and that not everybody has to become an expert.
But that's an interesting point and an important point, and that is someone has to be the champion, someone has to be the advocate, right? Look, in my mind, I'm in tech a long time. One of the biggest changes I've seen is where we used to hire salespeople to sell to customers. In a large number of organizations, that role, or not that they're replaced, but we don't have as many salespeople. We have advocates, we have evangelists, right? We have DevRel and so forth. In the same way we have sort of, let's call it external DevRel who are selling, right? For various organizations, we need internal. You need internal champions. You need internal DevRel. One of the earliest things I noticed when we first started DevOps.com is for DevOps advocates within an organization to be successful, they needed air cover, right? If they didn't have an executive who was sponsoring it, or at least, advocating, giving it some air cover, the chances of it being successful and taking root were slim.
One of the pathologies that we see over and over and over is that there's this breakdown in communication between engineering leadership and the rest of the org, because it's so easy to get money for headcount and to hire people, and it's so hard to get money to to make it someone else, to pay vendors, right? Like it's easier to spend $250,000 in hiring 2 new people than it is to spend, you know, a tenth of that much just spinning up a new vendor, which is insane, right? Like the incentives like aren't really, you know, there's a breakdown in communication. I think most engineering leaders don't understand how to make the case in terms of like cost benefit and like actual, you know, costs. So they're used to just going to battle for sums of money, and this results in so much duplication of effort, so much duplication of work, so much distraction, so much, you know, just like, yeah, there's a lot of ways that it breaks down.
And doubling down on the, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, like, you know, I worked at a large financial institution here in Canada for a number of years doing like basically DevOps advocacy. We were running like a coaching team to get people like excited about DevOps and this stuff. The only way we could be successful, like we wanted obviously like people to get excited about DevOps through like a grassroots movement, but there was no way we could absolutely be successful unless we had that leadership
Exactly.
support from up top. Because, you know, if you don't have someone that ultimately says thou shalt do the DevOps or thou shalt do the observability, people don't have that kind of incentive. Unfortunately, I've seen it at a previous job at this financial institution. I saw it at my last job running the observability team. We were lucky that we had support for observability, for doing things the right way, because otherwise, you know, we wouldn't have gone in the right direction.
And how quickly we forget, because when we were doing Agile transformations 15 years ago, anybody who's switched over to Agile for the first time, those first 2 or 3 sprints are kind of a disaster. They never went well. There was a learning curve. Everybody needed to figure this out. And as teams got proficient at it, the value really started to come out of that change in process, that change in mindset, that change in tooling that needed to happen. This is what we're talking about here as well with observability. It is a fundamental shift in how you're using a lot of your existing technology and acquiring some of the little gaps that may exist. Many large enterprises have the tools they need already. You don't need to buy something new. You need to change how you're using what you already have.
Bjorn, I wanted to come back to you.
Yeah. So from touching, I want to give a quick feedback on the leadership thing. I think this has been a bottleneck or an area of constraint at any change, like any technology change or process change that needs to be introduced. That I believe there is a key role by the leadership. So recently, based on all these lessons, we started doing something focused with the leadership. First, defining what the why is. Let's build a rallying cry on why we are doing this change, right? And so that you get them all excited. This is why everybody should be excited to do this work. Everybody should be excited to come to the office or doing remote work here in this new culture. You have to drive the excitement behind the why too. So before we touch a team as the champion team to introduce all these new techniques or new tools or whatever we're trying to accomplish it, the first thing that we started doing is just bringing the leadership team together and defining the problem statement and defining the charter around why we are doing it. That clears up a lot of confusion and alignment and all those things. And let's define a charter of why this particular organization is wanted to adopt observability or DevOps or go cloud native or whatever that objective could be. I think it's important for us to define it and get that alignment first. So once that's done, the grassroots movement will be very successful. The teams are ready to do it, because if I could relate back to my career times, this has been an extra work that I always did after my 9-to-5 job. Like I go learn about DevOps and learn about cloud and come back and show to my team members and do what it is. How do we get away from that and make sure this is part of your job and you get paid, you get recognized for improvements and continuous improvements around that. So once you have the leadership support, and then we can start with the grassroots movement, and the leadership can go back, can chain it down to their team leadership and whatnot, so that they are appreciated about doing it. Otherwise, there is no incentive for any of these teams to continue doing or challenging their existing status quo. So they have to keep the lights on, and they don't get anything extra by just doing this something different. Hey, I introduced this instrumentation in my code so that next time when this incident happens, I can know for it. How are they appreciated for that? How are they incentivized for that? So I think the leadership support was very big key. So they have to support the why behind that, So I would push hard for having a conversation with the leaders or the sponsor, bringing them into the room. Let's work together. Let's define the charter. Let's start from there. Now you have a clear goal to go after. And you could be agile, the small agile, where I'm going to try this for 3 months. Let's see if it's going to work. Let's define the outcomes for what I'm going to accomplish for the 3 months, and let's go all in on that. And if it doesn't work, we'll come back to the drawing board. Let's figure out where it went wrong, go to the next step, and so on and so forth.
I think to add to that, it not only like, bringing the leaders into the room to get buy-in, but also like bring them into ground level. Like going back to Brian's comment about the agile transformations that we saw in many large and small organizations. Oftentimes you'd be in situations where, like you'd have these agile teams stood up and they got to a good cadence, and then all of a sudden some exec swoops down and basically craps all over the entire initiative, and then all of that good work has like gone to hell, right? So you need to like constantly keep that you need to keep that conversation going, right? So that those executives actually know what's going on the ground, so that they don't run interference, whether it's accidentally or on purpose, to like, stick with the mission, right?
Agreed. Hey guys, I need to pop in here because we're 52 minutes in. We give away 4 Amazon gift cards on every one of these roundtables, and I have to announce the winners so that the team doesn't get the inevitable, "Hey, I thought you said you were giving away gift cards." So let me put on my glasses so I can read. Well, I can't read it from that far away, but it looks like the winners are Lettel A, Judy, I'm going to say S, Marie L, and Christopher with a K, M. And our webinar team will reach out to you and get you guys, folks, your gift cards. Thank you very much for attending today's roundtable. Guys, in the time left, right? We don't, Tricentis is a pleasure to work with as a sponsor. I have to encourage them to promote their company on these things. But I want to ask Ryan, I want to ask Charity, I want to ask Bjorn, and Adriana, if we have time, I'd like to finish up with you. Tell me specifically in your organization, what are you doing in the case of the 3 with not Adriana, what are you doing for your customers to strengthen that intersection between testing and observability, whether it be product wise or consulting wise or what have you? And then Adriana, talk about it, maybe what's happening if you're allowed to. Well, actually, Adriana, you're at Lightstep now too. You
Yeah.
are. I'm still thinking too, guys. Talk about it with Lightstep as well. If it's okay, Charity, would you mind if I asked you first to kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, what was the question exactly?
So what at Honeycomb, what specifically can you tell people or point people to a product, a service, something that will help them navigate that intersection between testing and observability?
Yeah. I would recommend that you start with something that we call build events, which is a great library, or it's a thing that you can use our free tier to instrument your build pipeline, your CI/CD pipeline, so that you can see where the tests are slow or where things are flaky or whether like it's getting longer over time, or and which is really, because I think that such a critical part of this is that feedback loop, that it be like the REPL, that a feedback loop of deploying be short and tight, and so your tests aren't running for days or whatever. And I think it's really smart for teams to set like an upper bound, like we don't want it to take longer than an hour to deploy. I recommend 15 minutes or less, but like the shorter the better. So instrument your pipeline as a trace, and you can see where all the time is going. It's brilliant. It gives you a really nice, like, dip your toe into the world of observability and get something really materially useful back.
Excellent. Brian, how about you?
Yeah, so working at Tricentis, we advocate strongly for continuous testing for the digital business. As people are migrating towards cloud platforms, towards container-based architectures, new types of challenges are coming in, particularly around figuring out what the heck is going on as containers pop in and out of existence. We have a completely automated, low code or fully codeless set of solutions designed to help you test all of these different aspects of modern application delivery stacks, and are tightly integrated into an observability ecosystem through our partnerships with a lot of the leading APM vendors, but as well as the open source solutions like Prometheus and OpenTelemetry.
Excellent. Excellent. Bjorn, how about you?
Yeah, so I think we touched about the instrumentation, the tool side. Let me share another perspective. So if you feel that you're at an intersection of performance testing and observability, you're not a choice to pick either or. It is not an intersection where you want to go in one direction or another. It is a point that you have to operate on both the sides. So both the systems would need to be in play. Your continuous testing should be maturing. You should get into more closer towards more automation in testing world, and getting into that more like a shared responsibility plus observability as a choice. So it's not an either or. So you make sure at any given point. So I've seen this trend from when there's more automated testing, the unit testing doesn't have to be there. So it's not, everything has a purpose in it, and you have to build on top of that. Same applies to performance testing or testing and observability. It's not an either or. So make sure you challenge that. Second, to any of those instrumentation, if there is a black box solution within your company, challenge that. I think the purpose of all those things is not to make it as a black box, to make that information or measuring visible to everybody. So if this is something a team is providing a service within your organization, I would be very curious. I would say go challenge them, see, I wanted to figure out how can I read this logs, or how can I see this progress towards it, so that the developer or engineers doing the work gets that insight while doing the work. So it's not like giving it to somebody and just getting some feedback at a later point of the stage.
Excellent. Thank you. Adriana, how about you?
So I would recommend, so one thing that I wanted to talk about briefly is something called trace-based testing, which was originally presented by Ted Young in KubeCon North America in 2018. So be sure to check out the talk recording, because it's kind of it's a cool concept. The idea is basically using your traces to help define your test cases. And there are two products out there that now allow you to do that. One is called Trace Test, which I think came out in May of this year. And then there's another one called Malabai. And both of them allow you to basically take your OpenTelemetry traces and define test cases out of them, which is super cool. It's a really good way of bringing testing, of having that intersection between testing and observability. The other thing that I wanted to touch on briefly is this idea of basically, observability is a tool not just for SREs, not just for developers, but is a tool for testers. And so, as a tester, wouldn't it be great to not just discover bugs, but also figure out what's causing them? And observability gives them that. So then they can provide the additional feedback of, okay, to developers, okay, I know what's causing this. Or if they don't know what's causing it, they can go back and say, hey, you know what, you're missing some instrumentation in your code. This is what I think you're missing.
Excellent. Guys, we're almost out of time. We have a few minutes left. Mitchell, I wanted to give you the last word here to wrap it up.
I posted this in the chat. It's just fascinating. I just learned so much listening to our panel. The thought I had was, we don't talk about observability and testing together a lot, but they're like a Reese's peanut butter cup. Hey, you got observability on my testing. Hey, you got testing on my observability. They go great together. Matter of fact, they go hand to hand. You can't do it one without the other, really. So I think this will help all of us advance that conversation in our organization.
Absolutely. We are at the top of the hour. Charity, Bjorn, Brian, Adriana, thank you so much for being on our panel today. Mitchell, as always, thanks for being the anchor leg here and holding this together. Most of all, thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch this or is watching it on demand afterwards. We invite you to check out the next DevOps Unbound Live Roundtable, as well as our bi-weekly videos on anything related to DevOps. It's always great. Again, also thanks to our good friends at Tricentis for sponsoring this and making it possible. Until next time, this is Alan Schimmel. We're out. Bye-bye. Okay.